Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Huett Writing Center. Spring 2014 is the debut of this concept, and the purpose of it is just to support you in writing about complex educational issues. So in this presentation, I'm going to introduce you to some of the things that I've placed on the Huett Writing Center page. Um, but first, let's go ahead and talk about a few background issues. First of all, why bother with understanding educational issues? Isn't it enough if you just work hard at your job as a future teacher? You know, you're going to become a teacher, many of you, and many of you are going to become speech language pathologists. Isn't that enough that if you just kind of duck your head down and you work hard, then everything should take care of itself? Well, I would say no. I would say that in order to change any system, that you first have to understand it. And the educational system, and that includes the field of speech language pathology that operates within that educational system. If you're going to change it and keep improving it, you have to first understand it. And that's where the importance of this class comes in. Um, who is concerned with educational issues then? Is it just the people working in the system and the students within it? And maybe just the parents? Well, certainly all of those folks are concerned with educational issues because they impact, their daily life. But everybody else gets to take a stab at being concerned with them as well because education is grounded in a political context. It's not apolitical. And I used to think very naively that if I just did my job, um, those 180 days of the school year, and I did it well, and I paid attention to curriculum and students and things like that, that was all I needed to do. And that's most of what you do is the task, but you need to devote some of your mental energy to understanding what's going on in educational, because if you ignore it, and if you just think doing your job is all you have to do, then other people with different motivations possibly from those of us within the school building get to make a lot of the decisions that impact your lives. And so I hope in this class we get to see evidence of some of that, of outside forces that push down on the educational system. And it's so important that the folks within the system, the teachers, and I should have put speech language pathologists here as well. I could add that right now, actually. Um, it's important that you're paying attention so that you have a voice. And sometimes you've got to force your voice on the powers that be. So not just the folks within the system, but also folks from without the system: philosophers, politicians, taxpayers, citizens, anybody that's sentient is concerned with and interested in educational issues. And I'm hoping you'll become one of those people too. I I really like this graphic from David and Cuban's Cutting Through the Hype, The Essential Guide to School Reform. First of all, that word reform, what does that mean? Well, to me that means, okay, so you've got educational issues, which is a different concept. An issue, which is a problematic word. If you Google like the word issue, you'll find that people don't like that word sometimes. But anyway, in this course, issue might mean, the simple definition might be problem. So as I see it, a reform is where you identify a problem and then you try to implement a change to solve that problem. That's a simple definition. So reform is sort of a response to a problem or an issue. So this is a great graphic that shows the many influences on reforms from policy to practice. You take this school and this classroom where you're going to be working as speech language pathologists or teachers, and again, you can innocently think that all you have to worry about is what goes on in this building, and again, that's most of what you do. But you need to be aware of all of these folks that are pushing down on you. They're putting pressure on the system, this education system, that where some dictates come from the federal government, many come from the state, many come from the local school district, the Board of Education, the central office, and they push down on you, and they are greatly impacted by all of these different interests. Some of them have the best interests of the school and the classroom at heart, and some, might be shady and ill-motivated. So you just want to be aware of that. In this class, we're going to read things that are from a variety of these folks. We're going to read, from the media. We're going to read newspaper articles, for example. We'll read things that come out of think tanks, a little bit out of advocacy groups, like let's see, the Brookings Institute, for example. I know we have an article from them coming up, and they would be considered a think tank. Some might even call them an advocacy group, and they certainly operate in the realm of politics. And they write things and they put pressure on politicians, for example, that then puts pressure on what goes on in your classroom. So just keep this in mind. This is a handy little graphic that kind of helps you to understand um, a lot of the pressures that bear down on what you do in your classroom. I created this page just to give you an example of just some of the people we'll be hearing from in this course. Maybe I don't know if we're going to hear from Michelle Rhee, but I like this picture of her. A lot of educators don't exactly love her. She's from the Washington D.C. school district. For a few years, she worked there. Here we've got Bill Gates, who's a philanthropist that pumps a lot of money into education and has an impact. Here's a student that we'll probably hear from in a later video. Diane Ravitch is a proponent. She was originally a proponent of school reform through the standards movement in the 90s and has since then switched her views on it and doesn't fully appreciate what market reformists like Bill Gates are doing in the school system. This is Jeffrey Canada of the Harlem Children's Zone, and this is Sir Ken Robinson. As we listen to these people, like I'll throw videos from these people into the module. That doesn't mean everything they're saying is right. That doesn't mean everything that they say is something you should agree with. And so what I'm trying to do by showing you this diversity of views is just urge you to, um, listen to what they say, listen to whether they give any evidence that backs up what they say, and then ask yourself, do you agree with them? Do you not agree with them? Maybe you agree with them a little bit. Maybe you agree with them on a few points. And I want you to try to be collecting what you feel your viewpoints are. And hopefully listening to these folks will, and others, will help you to hone your own views. Near the end of the semester, in the final blog post, you are going to be asked to kind of lay out what you think would be an ideal school. I don't have the details for that at this moment, but basically, you're going to hear all these folks talking about how we should be doing schooling. I want you to be collecting your ideas about that. How should we be doing this? How should we be improving the system? You're going to actually look at a model. You're going to look at a certain specific school or school model, and then I want you to come up with your own tweaks and what you think would be the ideal school. So that's coming up. That's why as you listen to these folks, be thinking, what do I think is the ideal? Okay. What is the authoritative source for understanding educational issues? Well, in previous semesters, I had a textbook for you, and it cost $100, and I decided to remove it to save us, for example, in spring 2014, we're saving $7,000 because, well, we can, because there's so much great stuff on the internet for a class like this. And so the textbook is not necessary. Now, the great thing about a textbook is that it makes you think that everything is neatly tied together and that you have an authoritative text that helps you understand issues. But that's naive. And so the risk I'm exposing, the risky side of this is that when you explore the resources that I've selected, it's easy to get sidetracked. It's easy to get overwhelmed, especially when you're on the internet reading things and the one article links out to 5 other things. It's easy to get lost. But that's the reality of it. It's highly complex. It's a competing soup of voices mediated by politics. And often the authoritative sources are not necessarily those most backed by research evidence. They might just be the ones that are most persuasive. Maybe they tell the best story and they capture people's imagination, and people want to go along with that idea because it sort of makes sense. Like the idea that market forces should be injected into education. That made a lot of sense when it was first put forward in the late 80s, early 90s. People thought, yeah, let the market decide. But here, 20 years into it, we're not so sure that just because that might make sense it might have some kind of appeal, we're not always sure that holds true anymore. So there's no authoritative source. You are one of the authorities. Just like all these folks have their views, you're going to be having your view. You want it to be based on as much evidence as you can, where available. Okay. All right, so turning then to a few resources that I provided with you, I provided for you. I don't want this Hewitt Writing Center to be yet another thing to sort of dominate your life or take a lot of time away, but hopefully it'll be helpful. So first, I talk about modes of writing because in our syllabus, in the course objectives, there's a couple of modes of writing that it wants us to use in this class. Those being the modes of analysis and the modes of critique and interpretation. Okay, so I talk about those modes of writing in here. I also give you a few helpful frameworks. I don't give you anything that totally solves all your problems, but maybe these frameworks will be helpful for you in thinking about complex educational issues. So we'll go through those very quickly. I talk then briefly about the citation of sources, and then of course I give a link to our lovely UWG Writing Center, which is a true writing center. This Hewitt Writing Center thing, it's just a little, really just a, as you know by now, it's just a little web page of some possibly helpful information. So if in doubt, or if writing is really not your thing, or if you're concerned about it at all, I would suggest that you make use of the UWG Writing Center if you're able to. All right, so in terms of modes of writing, I've broken it down into two modes, and you don't have to worry too much about this. When you're writing, you don't have to be like, okay, I'm doing analysis, or now I'm doing critique and interpretation. But these are sort of two main things, main ways of writing if you're writing blog posts in this class, and you're like, I don't know exactly how to approach this topic. I don't know what, like, even if I give you a prompt that asks you to do specific things, these are certain questions that you may choose to answer in your blog post. It may help you to sort of address these in addition to my prompt. Like anytime I'm writing, even though I'm given a prompt by a professor, I always try to add some extra, what I call goo. I add extra information to kind of set the stage. And so these are sort of stage setting questions you can ask yourself. For example, for any issue, you can ask, what is that issue? What are its parts? And maybe it's made up of multiple issues or problems. How does it work or not work? And not all of these questions will apply to any given issue that you're looking at either. So that's why there's a multitude of questions. Is this issue a solution to a problem? Or is it the problem itself? Who or what is making this issue happen? What is its history? When did it originate? How has it evolved over time? What is the cost to society of ignoring this issue? And what are the proposed solutions to this issue? And sometimes if you're looking at a reform, then a reform is a solution. And if you are looking at a reform or solution to an educational problem, then is there any evidence that that's working or should work? So these are really analysis type questions to help you think about an issue, to help you look at it from a variety of angles. I put these here to help you. You don't, again, for any issue or reform, you may not be answering all these questions. They may not be answerable. They may not make sense. But use this to kind of stimulate your thinking if it helps you to do that. And then on the critique and interpretation side, questions you can ask about an issue or a reform, which is sort of a solution to an issue maybe. You can ask what is good about this, what is not good about it, what are its strengths and weaknesses, how can we as educators act on what we know about this issue. So those are a few questions. I could probably add some more, but that's all I've got for now. So use that to help you brainstorm things to write about. It might help to provide analytical material where you answer some of these questions. And then to end any blog post, it might help to do a little critique and interpretation. That, weaving that into the prompt. I'm not saying you have to, but I'm saying if you're a person who's like, I have no idea what to write about, she wants us to write 600 words. I've already answered her prompt. I have nothing else to say, but I still like 500 words. Come here and use this as an inspiration to adding and going more in depth and letting us know more about this particular issue. All right, so I've got a few helpful frameworks. At least I hope they're helpful. And we'll just go through them right now. The first one I've already talked to you about, but I think this is a helpful thing to remember, that there's so many influences on reforms, and all of these things impact educational issues. So keep that many influences on reforms image, representation, figure handy. Here's one that Jesse Bishop at Georgia Highlands College has shared with me. He's a writing instructor in the English department at Georgia Highlands, and I really like this picture. It's of the semiotic iceberg, and the word semiotic means having to do with signs. Um, and so if you imagine this is you standing up here on the bow of a ship, I guess, to go with this iceberg metaphor, and you look out into the water, and above the waterline you can see this sign. Maybe it's an issue in the case of our class. And about that sign, you can probably answer the who, what, when, where, and how. And that's, to go back to this, those are the analysis types of things. Um, a lot of them are the analysis types of things, although it's a little more complicated than that. So beneath any sign, anything, any issue, you've got all of these other things going on. You've got ideologies, you've got persistent beliefs, you've got maybe some values, morals, social expectations, customs, fantasies, ethical stances, prevalent attitudes, cultural myths. You've got race, gender, and class conflicts and assumptions, belief systems, dominant power structures, etc. And so just keep that in mind that there's the obvious aspects to any given issue, but beneath it you've got all of these things swirling and motivating and having an effect on that issue. So it's a useful thing to think about. It doesn't solve a lot of your problems, but it just reminds you that everything is always more complex than what is obvious. And I want you to, refer to this as needed to remind yourself of that. I really like this image. I don't know where I got it. I got it off the internet and I can't cite the source, but I went ahead and just plugged it in here. It's a great representation of framework for thinking about societies. And education, swirls around in the middle of all this. In fact, they put the word education right here. But just look at these things that can impact on the educational environment. History, geography, politics, beliefs, economics. Um, Hopefully that will stimulate your thinking. All right, so let's look at critical thinking dispositions. In order to write your best in an issues class, there are, I believe this is 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 things that I want you to strive to be. I want you to be inquisitive, open-minded, systematic, analytic, truth-seeking, self-confident, and mature. Okay? These are all dispositions that you want to try to foster in yourself. You might have to let go of preconceived notions about things. We all harbor beliefs, and sometimes we're not aware of our beliefs, and those affect the way we think about things. But if you dig deeper, you may realize that some of your beliefs are worthy of being questioned. And so refer to this list as you undertake blogging on educational issues topics in this course. In terms of citation of sources, on the blogs, I'm totally okay with you being informal, and by that I mean you don't have to use proper APA or MLA on the blogs themselves. However, don't just go claiming ideas that are not your own. If you know that someone you read in the materials made a claim, take the trouble to name the person or name the organization or name the source where you got that information from. And you can do sort of a hybridized version of APA or MLA citation. You can be formal on the blogs. That's totally fine. I mean, I like to read formal, but at the same time, I'm not emphasizing that in this class because I feel like you have enough to do, and we can really bog down with the formalities if we let ourselves. And I don't want you to. I want you to get more out of reading and interacting with that reading, and maybe quickly linking out to things, and quickly citing sources and ideas that are not your own and that you know are not your own, and then moving on. There may be some assignments where I ask that you be more formal, and when that's the case, I urge you to use whatever resources you have that guide you in the use of MLA or APA. I let you use MLA because I was a former English teacher, and I know a lot of you are probably familiar with it from high school. APA is what we use in the social sciences and education in the communications disorders field. APA is what they use. So you're welcome to use that as well. And the Purdue Online Writing Lab, OWL, provides support for both of those methods of citing sources, those style guides. I know at least one of you in this class in spring 2014 uses Chicago. You can use another form like Chicago or Turabian if that's your preference. No problem. Just use a system. that is only, I'm talking about the instances where formal citation is required. Again, for blogging, we are informal, but we're still crediting sources. All right, and finally, in all things, there's a UWG Writing Center. You can make an appointment, and that's on the homepage of the UWG Writing Center, where you learn how to do that. So I close here with the concept of critical engagement. It's a lifelong process to learn how to become engaged with your world, to pay attention to what's going on with it, and to become sort of political and to have opinions about it. In this course, you're going to hear from a lot of people that call you to participate and engage in your world. And I will acknowledge that it's not easy, and I feel like I myself do not do that sufficiently. I'm almost age 40 here, and I still kind of sit back and just read and think rather than engage. But you'll be called to do it, and the choice is yours. One thing is clear: if you are going to engage in your world, you need to understand it first. And in order to understand it, you should approach the task with inquisitiveness, open-mindedness, and maturity, among other things. It's important to explore a variety of viewpoints and slowly determine what it is that you believe. So hopefully this course is going to support you in getting one step closer to understanding your own feelings and beliefs about issues in education. Again, like I told you, near the end of the course, you're going to be asked to kind of provide a summary of what you think would be the ideal school. So kind of be collecting those ideas as we come across varying viewpoints across the modules. All right, I need to shut it down because this video has become way too long. So I hope that there was some useful stuff in here. Welcome to the Huett Writing Center. Come back to it as much as you need in order to help support you in your writing this semester. Thank you.